the more merits that you have, the more that you will be free. So to answer your questions, how do we achieve liberation? What do we do? How do we eliminate suffering? Is we have to be free. We have to be free physically and spiritually. And one way to do that is to avoid faults and sins and to cultivate merits. In other words, to be selfless. Because selflessness generates merits. Selfishness will lead to faults and sin. So there is a strong correlation between merit and liberation. And the more merits that you have, the faster your desires will come to fruition. Like a person who has money, you want something, you get it right away. As a person who doesn't have much money, you have to wait until your paycheck comes, then you have money. And the person who lacks merit, then they have no money to spend. Right? So the more merits that you have, the more it is at your disposal to realize your desires. Whatever you want, you get. So we'll look at our own lives. Whatever we want, and of course, good things. There's a difference between merits and karmic rewards. But let's talk about merits. The good side of it is we'll look at our lives and we can see how much merit we have is whatever we want, does it come to fruition quick or slow? If it comes quickly, then we know that we have merits. If it comes slowly, then we know that we lack merits. But as you practice Buddhism and you practice selflessness, you will realize that 3 years later, things come quicker. The things that you want come quicker. If you don't believe me, try it out. Give yourself 3 years. Every day, try your best to cultivate selflessness. Right? Compassion. Have compassion towards others. Practice giving. You will realize that about 3 years or so. Some people are quicker. Depends on how karmic retribution that we have. Where you start. If you're starting with a lot of merits already, you will realize that things will come even quicker. And so give yourself a chance, 3 years about, and you will realize, and you have nothing to lose, right? Out of 100 years, only 3 years. That's a big deal. But although the next 3 years, you practice giving, you will realize that 3 years later, things will come very quickly. Whatever you want, things will happen quicker, at a quicker pace. So we want to be liberated, we gotta have merits. We cannot be liberated and have no merits. In other words, if we want to be liberated, we gotta treat people nicely. You have to practice giving, practice compassion to cultivate merits so that we have freedom. Right? Liberation is freedom. A person who lacks merit cannot have freedom. So we practice meditation and we feel meditative bliss, and we just want to be secluded. We don't want to help anybody else out because we don't want to be bothered. If one day you are liberated and I don't see you anymore, then that might be a problem there. Because the problem here is that if we pursue liberation for ourselves, then we are going in the opposite direction. We are falling back to selfishness. And with selfishness, sooner or later, it's going to bring suffering. We may be okay now, but what's waiting for us at the end of the road is suffering. So we have to be watchful of ourselves. Sometimes we are so absorbed in our own practice that we don't care about others. We just want to be blissful. We don't want to be bothered. And so we stop coming to like a spiritual community to support. And so if nobody comes here, there's an opportunity for others to come, and I go away too. And then we just lost the opportunity to cultivate merits. Some people are here because they already know things that I'm saying. Some people are earnest about learning new things. But some people already know, and so when we know something, when we achieve something, we have to support those who are not there yet. Right? So we're here together to provide an environment, a positive environment for others to come. Just because we already know doesn't mean we can stop coming. Because when we stop coming, we stop cultivating merits. And if we don't cultivate marriage, meaning that we have enjoyed our marriage, right? We've come to learn, we reap the benefits, and then we leave. You come to a party, you eat, and then you leave the mess behind. And who has to clean up that mess? Well, the people who are cultivating marriage, cleaning up the mess. And when we leave, we depleting our marriage. Because you enjoy, you deplete your marriage. But when you deplete your marriage to a point where you have nothing left, and that's where suffering comes, because we are enjoying, we're being selfish. So we come here together to cultivate marriage. And it's only marriage that we can achieve liberation. Right? So there is a strong correlation between marriage and liberation. There are two ways to achieve liberation: the path of wisdom and the path of marriage. I say two ways, but actually there are two of the same way. It's not like you practice wisdom on one path and then jump to another path, you cultivate marriage. That's not what I mean here. I separate that here to help us explain, but really there are two of the same path. How you can achieve liberation with wisdom is that with wisdom, it allows us to break our ego, our delusion. Right? So you turn on the light, you can see the exits until you can be liberated. And so that's the path of wisdom. The other path is marriage. With marriage, it allows us to be successful in what we do. So when you cultivate marriage, two paths will open, two doors will open. One is for you to enjoy the worldly pleasure. The second is spiritual bliss, meditative bliss. When you pursue the worldly pleasure, it turns into karmic rewards. A person with abundant karmic rewards, whatever they want, they have. Money, fame, fortune, the five desires, they will be able to realize the five desires very quickly, easily. The karmic rewards will bring you back to the cycle of life and death. Whereas spiritual liberation will bring you to the state of no suffering. Right? So with marriage, when we choose the path of spiritual liberation, we will be able to observe precepts successfully. Precepts are the limits that we don't want to cross because it will lead to faults and sins. Not everybody with karmic rewards can observe the precepts. Those who are rich, famous, it's very difficult for them to leave the riches behind and practice meditation. They want to go enjoy. So just because they're Buddhists and they cultivate marriage, doesn't mean that they can observe the precepts. So even if they have karmic rewards, they really have no merits. Does that make sense? Because marriage requires a little bit of self-discipline. When you have self-discipline, you can observe the precepts. When you can observe the precepts successfully, your mind is more meditative. And that's when the next step is meditation. You are no longer being fooled by the world. You are no longer being easily tricked by the worldly pleasure. But you have self-discipline. You don't go out and buy a new car, for example, when you have money. But you feel very happy in what you already have. You don't need to go out and search for happiness. Some people like to change their cars every 2 years or 3 years because they get so tired of what they have so easily. That's the person who lacks meditation. A person who has meditation, they can take anything that they have and enjoy it. A person who lacks meditation, they get tired of the worldly pleasure very quickly. New cars they have, new friends, they change friends because the current friend doesn't give them enough satisfaction and they move on. In other words, a person who lacks meditation is very inefficient. They always have to be charged spiritually. They always have to be excited in order to feel happy. A person who is meditative, they're like a Prius, or that goes a long time before you have to refuel. Whereas a person who lacks meditation is like a Hummer. where the gas efficiency is 1 mile a gallon or something like that. And so if we find ourselves needing to look at our phones and text and surf the web, then we are asking to be charged spiritually, in a sense, to make us happy. Because we feel like we need to grab onto something in order to be happy. If we leave the phone down, we have anxiety, separation anxiety from our phone. And a person who lacks meditation is always anxious, always has that worries, anxiety. They feel like they need to grab onto something in order to be happy. But a person who is meditative, they're very at ease all the time, whether with or without their phone. They don't have the anxiety. Right? They don't need to always be on Facebook to check out what's going on, what their friends are up to. If they leave their phone for an hour, that's a lot of anxiety. Some people can get separation anxiety to a point where they can get to depression. So a person who is so inefficient spiritually that they have to be continuously charged, meaning the battery can no longer retain charge. So the more meditative we are, the longer that we can maintain that meditative charge, or meditative bliss. Does it make sense? Right? So in order to achieve liberation or freedom, here is that a person who is independent, right? A person who can go anywhere, do anything, unrestricted. A person who lacks meditation is like a prison. In a prisoner that cannot escape, cannot do things freely. So when we achieve spiritual liberation, we are no longer dependent on the external world or something of material to make us happy. What we have inside is already happiness. In fact, you don't want those things because those things are just going to drag you down. Right? When you have a fully charged battery and a almost depleted battery, when you put them together, it drains very quickly, right? So similarly, when we are at a point where we are so spiritually happy, liberated, we feel, we want to minimize interaction because it's just going to interfere with our own liberation, our own meditative joy. But when we have that thinking, we're falling back to selfishness, right? We only worry about our own self. While we think that we are pursuing liberation, but we're actually pursuing suffering because we have that factor of selfishness in it. We always should be mindful of ourselves that is this a selfish action or is this selfless action? Because if it's selfish, suffering is not very far behind. Eventually, we will have anxiety. We will have fear. We will live in fear. There's a strong correlation between merits and liberation. There's no free lunch. You want to be liberated, you have to cultivate merits. But it takes a long time to cultivate infinite wisdom and merits. Lucky for us is that we have this special method called the Pure Land method. On the path of wisdom and merit, you have to cultivate to a point where it's infinite wisdom and merit. But we don't have that time. We don't live that long, and we are busy with our own lives. We are not committed to Buddhism 100% of our lives. We have work to do, a family to take care of. So we're very busy. Our 8 hours, the whole day, 24 hours. How many of us can say we are very serious about the path of liberation? Not many of us. But we know that we want liberation, we want happiness, but we're not committed to it. So there is a irony there, right? We want to pursue something, but we're not willing to put in effort. But we should be grateful that we have met Buddhism because Buddhism can lead us to ultimate liberation. But we are even luckier, if you think about it, to have met the Pure Land method where we don't have to achieve infinite wisdom to be liberated. We can use the Pure Land method, and that is to chant Amitabha. With that method, after this lifetime, we migrate to a better environment where we don't have to worry about food, we don't have to worry about making a living. And our friends are bodhisattvas, sages, saints, who are among us to practice with us. It's just like a bamboo that you don't have to crawl all the way up to the top to get out, but you can just pierce through the middle. So it is so possible for us in this lifetime to achieve liberation if we follow the Pure Land method. So we don't have to be discouraged about cultivating to infinite wisdom and merit. There is help. There is light at the end of the tunnel for us in this lifetime that we can achieve complete, ultimate liberation.